Jesus also taught about marriage and remarriage issues. And he has, in the Synoptic Gospels, he deals with quite a lot with this. But let's pick the passage in Matthew 19. We read in verse 1, when Jesus had finished saying these things, he left Galilee and went into the region of Judea, to the other side of the Jordan. Large crowds followed him, and he healed them there. Some Pharisees came to him to test him. He had asked, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any and every reason? Basically, the questions are very useful because they give opportunity to the speaker to scratch where it itches, deal with the problem exactly where the questioner is feeling the problem is. When you talk generally, you may be talking things that are not really customized to the people that are listening to you. But if you give them an opportunity to ask you questions, they ask questions that are relevant to their needs. And it sounds like, unlike the preachers of today, the preaching of Jesus allowed questions. Many times you will see him preaching and then there are questions. I don't know that they were impromptu or it was a question time given, but there was a time to give questions. One of the things that was disturbing the people that time, and I think it's disturbing us today, is it lawful? Is it okay? It's spiritually okay, theologically okay for one to divorce his wife for any and every reason? Is there some reasons that are allowable, others not allowable? Is it okay at any time to actually divorce? Is a question people are asking. What's the understanding? What understanding do they have of divorce in Jesus' days? I think what they understood is you are married to a woman and you are not happy with her. You formally release her to go back to her parents and you can continue your life, maybe with your children, but not with your wife. Then that's called divorce. And Moses, in the traditions, seems to have allowed them to give a certificate of divorce. In other words, confirm this woman is no longer my wife. And so they're asking, is it okay? Is there anything wrong with it? Divorce is not just separation. It's a final termination of the arrangement, of the marriage. It's no longer there. Not that he has gone, she is coming back. It is that she is gone for good. That was their understanding. So what they're asking is it okay? Not to go for a visit to your parents' place, but to go for good. And I think hidden in the question is, once I divorce, can I remarry? Obviously, remarriage was not a huge issue in that time because polygamy was still going on. And a lot of societies that have deal with polygamy actually divorce, but you stay in. In other words, when a husband is tired of a wife, he just gets a second wife and ignores the first one. She's still in the compound, but he may not visit her, he may not sleep with her, and she's still there. So, but he is meeting the financial needs of the children. So you cannot say he has divorced. But polygamy is a type of divorce because in the end you had given your personal attention to a particular woman, promised with her for life. The moment you get a second or a third or a fourth wife, you are taking away your time commitment to the first one. So though it's not legally that you are still together, it's really, strictly speaking, you have actually divorced the wife you committed yourself to. What Malachi called the wife of your youth. And I think it will be an important issue that you need to ask yourself. So it's the same thing as when you are unfaithful. You made a commitment that this will be the only woman. When you are unfaithful, you have some type of divorce because you are actually leaving the person you committed yourself to and catered for, to go to cater for other people who are not part of the relationship. And I think that's something that you need to think about clearly. So that's what they're asking. That's what the question really is. Verse 4, Jesus says, haven't you read that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female? That answers their question. I think he is saying, don't you understand there was arrangement from the beginning that marriage would exist and that marriage would be there? Why? He made a female different from a male so that the female would require the male. He made the male different from a female so that the male would require a female. That's why these issues about homosexual marriages in Jesus' teaching is a joke, because he deliberately made them different so that there will be, when they come together, there will be a need in a man that only a woman can fulfill, and there will be a need in a woman that only a man could fulfill. He is the one who made them different. Jesus is, in answering this question of marriage issues, he wants them first of all to understand that marriage is created from the way we are created. It is needed. That's why there cannot be procreation without having a male and a female. Homosexual marriages are barren marriages. You know, they end up adopting. Who are they adopting? People who are in a proper sexual relationship are the ones who get children. Then these people who are having fake relationship, which Jesus doesn't endorse, will go adopting and say they have children, but those are not their children. And I think it's important for you to understand why Jesus is emphasizing this whole issue, that God has created you with a need only your wife can meet. And God has created your wife with a need only you could meet. And that's why marriage, we need to stay together. There may be weaknesses with your spouse, but God created them to meet your need, certain needs. And you need to ask yourself, do you understand that difference? And that's why God has made you different. Of course, the trouble is, those differences, some of them are such that you, although your wife is meeting a need, she's so different from you in her thinking, in her attitude, in her character, that sometimes you feel like, no, I don't like her. But those differences that are making you not like her are the differences that makes her a woman, female. Those differences you don't like about your husband are differences that make him the man. And God made him different from you so that the two of you coming together can complement, not supplement, but complement each other into a fulfilling relationship that can produce children, which Malachi said is his intention in bringing you together, that you will produce a godly offspring. So the first reaction of Jesus to this question about marriage is, please remember that marriage is required. That's why he made male and female different. He's the one who deliberately made them different so that when they come together, they can come together in order to have a fulfilling relationship. So the fact that you are having a few changes, a few differences between you cannot be reason for divorce, because those differences are in creation. Your husband cannot become a woman. Your wife cannot become a man. Those are part of the way they are created. So you must learn to forgive and to accept the person, because they cannot be like you. You must accept the difference. So you cannot start saying, I'll divorce because my wife is different. I'll divorce because my wife doesn't think like me. I'll divorce because... No, that can't be. Because Jesus is telling them it is part of creation, it's nature. Those differences are part of what God created. And many marriages, the difference have to do with the fact that the woman wants the man to be like a woman, or the man wants the woman to think like a man, which can't happen. So you end up frustrating each other. But the fact, with those kind of differences that are created, you should just accept the person the way they are. And once you accept them, it will no longer annoy you. In verse 5, he says, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be related to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. In other words, Jesus is saying, because they are created different, a marriage becomes a necessity. A man will leave his father and mother because neither the father nor mother can meet certain needs. They can only be met by a wife. So, because I created them different, please understand then that the man cannot stay in his father's place forever. He will need to move to get a fulfillment in the woman. And so, for this reason, a man will leave the father and mother. That way, once he has left, now he is available to become united to his wife. And when they come together, they become so one, you can talk to them, you can talk about them, about being one flesh. And I think that's something that you need to be clear even as you talk about marriage. That Jesus gives a precursor. It is the fact that we are made different. We are made to marry. We are intended for marriage. That's why there are some people called to singlehood because there are ministries that require singles, but it is a minority. The majority of us end up having to marry. And it is all because of the way we were created. That's why you haven't found any culture in the world where people don't marry. Every anthropologist tells us whatever tribe he looks for, whatever group he looks for, he finally discovers a man and a woman will marry. It's an innate natural need that God created us with that causes us to want to marry. So, because of this need, you will leave the comfort of your parents to go to a stranger because something is pulling you to that stranger. Of course, your wife will be a stranger only for a while. But why are you leaving the known circumstances? Because there's something inborn in you that causes you to want to leave your father and mother so that you can create the new relationship to meet a natural need, a natural inclination that will help you to start anew. And the important thing is you don't just leave your mother and father, you now become united to your wife. And when you are united, you become one flesh, like one identity. Can you see he's still answering the question without mentioning it yet? The question is about divorce, but he's saying, please understand, you are created to be together by God. So it's a creation matter. Number two, please remember that you actually left your father and mother because they could not meet your need. That need can only be met by marriage. So why would you want to divorce the person who met a need that your parents could not actually meet? Then he is also telling them, so it can't be right to divorce. But hardly he is telling them, please understand, you have become one flesh. You have become one flesh. The only way you can separate is by ruining each other. Because once you are one flesh, it means that you touch one part, the other part feels pain. That's what it would mean to be one flesh. And so you are going to end up in pain. Although you intended to put pain on this other one, you also get pain. Why are you not to divorce? Because you are one flesh, and that one person hurting will hurt the other. Isn't that why people have divorced, still remain with a complex? Because the children are shared, and on the basis of those children, they still have to meet. Despite not liking each other, they still have to meet. Many years later, they still have to be together. Now, why? Because you became one flesh. There are things you now share with one another. Emotional, physical, all of them together make it difficult for you to divorce. So, and even if you go different ways, what you shared when you lived together will live to haunt you for the rest of your life. So Jesus is saying, you asking me about the divorce? Don't you know that It's God who created you different, and then created the desire to leave your parents so that you can be in your wife, and then help you to become one flesh, so that if you try to divorce, both of you will suffer in the process. Verse 6 is saying, so they are no longer two but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. He is still trying to answer the question, is it okay for you to divorce? Is it okay for you to divorce? He says, no, they are not two people. How can you divorce? You are not two people. You are one. So how do you divide one? If you have a pencil and it's one, you'd have to break it. That's destroying, partly destroying it. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Now, that's a clear reason why divorce becomes difficult. He is telling them, you are not two people, you are one. So how can you divorce? How? One flesh? It's like you are born one person. So if you want to divide yourself, you kill yourself in the process. You cannot survive. And he seems to be implying divorce is going to ruin you. You have become one flesh, so it will not therefore be very easy for you to start thinking of dividing yourself. Jesus wants them to get the picture of one whole person trying to divide himself into two. And obviously the answer is you kill yourself in the process. So on the basis of that argument, he finally comes to the conclusion. Therefore, on the basis of all I've been discussing, therefore, what God has joined together, if God is the one who brought you together, let no one separate. Let no one separate. So you can see he has given a basis for his reasoning in order to come to the conclusion. If it's God who brought you together, it isn't possible for you now to start talking about living separate life. What God has joined together, let no one separate. But it's still related with this issue of divorce. What is he saying? You did not bring yourself together. I know you wooed the girl, you courted her, she said yes, but you are not aware it's God who was orchestrating these circumstances that brought you together. So we don't come together in marriage through our own effort. God orchestrates circumstances and things that bring us together. If he is the one who brought us together, then how can we divorce on our own? What God has joined together, only God can separate, because he's the one who brought it together. So, are you understanding the argument? That if it's God who brought it together, then how can you actually divorce? You have no power. But you are not the only one without a power. Even a judge has no power, because you are saying, let no one, that includes the judge in a court of law, cannot declare your marriage done. Because God is the one who brought you together, only God can separate you. And how does God separate you? He takes one home. And he says, that's okay. When I want the marriage to end, I'll just take one of you out of the picture. Now, if that has not happened, you are supposed to remain in that marriage. What God has joined, only God can separate. No one else can do it. So it's the same thing with your parents. Your parents cannot separate you, because no one includes your parents. So you can't listen to the advice of your parents and say, what kind of a woman is this? Dump her. No. Remind them that they did not bring you together. That God himself is the one who brought you together, and only him can separate you. So your parents are not enough to advise you to leave the person you are married to. Let no one include your parents. Let no one include yourself, because you're also a person. Let no one include your spouse, because this is a person. Let no one include the counselor. If God has brought them together, then of necessity, you must allow God to be the one to separate. Until then, stay together. Verse 7 says, "Why then," they asked, "did Moses command that a man give his wife a certificate of divorce and send her away?" A good question. Hey, you are teaching, they are telling Jesus, is not in line with the Bible, with the Word of God, with the Scriptures, with the Torah. The Torah and Moses' teaching did allow that under certain circumstances, I could put off my wife and divorce her. That way I'm free to marry somebody else. Are you not misleading us? I think they're asking. We believe in the Torah. Moses commanded that a man give his wife a certificate of divorce. In other words, don't just embarrass your wife by where she is not sure whether she is in or out. Make it formal. And once you make it formal, then divorce is okay. That's the understanding of teaching. So they're asking, then what? You are trying to contradict what Moses taught us? Shouldn't you be saying the same thing as Moses did? And that will be a very important thing. It will be important to understand that this will give Jesus an opportunity to critique the Old Testament marriages that were still in vogue up to the time of his teaching. So he replies, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives because your hearts were hard. But it was not this way from the beginning. So it's given an opportunity to understand that there are divorces and polygamies in the Old Testament. But he's saying that's not the marriage to copy. Don't copy Solomon's marriage. Don't copy David's marriage. Go back to the beginning. What's the beginning? The first marriage. Adam and Eve. They never wooed each other. Yet when they came together, they stayed together until they died. God brought them together and they stayed together. That's really what the teaching is. So if you really want to follow God's word, go back to the beginning. This teaching about polygamy and divorce was not there at the beginning. It was not sanctioned. It was not okay. So, still answering the question, why should we not divorce despite the fact that the Old Testament it happened? Because it was not like that in the beginning. That was not God's intention. Why are we not to have polygamy? And yet there was polygamy in the Old Testament. Because it was not like that from the beginning. The initial position, if God wanted us to be polygamous, he would have just ensured that since he took a rib out of one side of man, he would have gone to the other side of man and produced another rib. That way he would have given 2 women to 1 man. But he knew that all the needs of 1 man can be met by 1 woman. So that marriage is a monogamous affair. But the Old Testament started loosely just dealing with the matter differently. He is now teaching them, no. We are not supposed to be following Old Testament pattern. We are supposed to go back to the God's original intention. It was not like that from the beginning. That's what he's saying. Did Moses commanded you or allowed you, permitted you to divorce because of the hardness of your heart? You are difficult. But it was not this way from the beginning. And I think that would be something very, very, very clear. Look at verse 9. Verse 9 now is categorical. He has settled his case that divorce is not to be allowed, and he has given various reasons. Verse 9, he finally says, I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for his sexual immorality, and marries another woman, commits adultery. In other words, you cannot remarry. Because if you remarry, you will be committing adultery, and your spouse also be committing adultery. Adultery is proved. And in other words, you say it was you are allowed. You are allowed, but if you went ahead and remarried, you'll be committing adultery. And so it's come out very clear. Of course, people argue Jesus gave an exception because he talked about except for sexual immorality. Oh, my husband is immoral. I agree. But the same Jesus teaching that, a little later will teach that when somebody sins against you, you must forgive him 70 times 7 times. That means your husband would have to have been unfaithful 490 times before you can give up on him. Otherwise, you are supposed to forgive them. So, it means, although it looks like an exception, it isn't quite an exception when you look at the totality of God's word. Because the same word is telling you, yeah, he deserves to be divorced, he deserves to be left aside. But if he says sorry, how will you understand the teaching of Jesus about forgiveness 70 times 7 times? And so it makes it very difficult to actually even have an exception of divorce when you are supposed to be also forgiving. But it's categorical. Therefore, I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife has prepared ground for immorality. And I think that's important. Look at verse 10. The disciples said to him, hey, if this is the situation between a husband and a wife, it's better not to marry. They have understood fully. People today don't seem to be understanding how clear Jesus was against divorce. But these ones understood that there seems to be nothing that can allow you to divorce. So the best thing is, don't marry in the first place. But if you marry, stay there unless you want to go to hell. They understood it and were in shock. Hey, this is too much. So it says, verse 11, Jesus replied, not everyone can accept this word, but only those to whom it has been given. For there are eunuchs who are born in that way, and there are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by others, and there are those who choose to live like eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. The one who can accept this should accept it. In other words, if you don't want to be held back and made to stay with somebody you don't like for the whole of your life, the best thing is not to marry. But then singlehood is not for everyone. He has given 3 types of single people. Eunuchs are people who did not marry. Some is because they are born with incapacity to have sex, so they're impotent, or frigid. I don't know which are the right words. So, and the best thing for them is remain single, because that's the way you are created. The other ones are people who have gone through an operation or an accident that caused them to stop being able to have sex. So therefore they have to remain single. But there are others who are healthy, biologically okay, but they have chosen to serve God in their single life. Those who choose to live like that for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. Those are that type of single. Those are okay. However, if you're not to that category, marry. But when you marry, understand you will not be able to withdraw from that marriage. That marriage is permanent. What God has joined together, let no one separate. That's what he's saying in verse 6 of Matthew chapter 19. So, what's Jesus teaching about divorce and marriage? That he does not support divorce, and he doesn't support remarriage, and that we should therefore not be quick to enter into marriage, but when you do, stay there. Learn how to domesticate your lion if you married a lion of a woman, but stay with her. Because if you don't, then obviously you, from what Jesus is teaching, you actually be sinning. And that will be quite an issue. So we have looked at the teachings from Malachi, then you have looked at teachings by Paul, you have now looked at teachings by Jesus. And the word of God is very clear. Stay in your marriage, look at how to make it better but don't try to leave it. Invest in enriching your relationship.